The Wasatch Range stretched for miles, its peaks like stone knives cutting into a pale Utah sky. When Daniel Reed drove there that Friday afternoon, the world felt hollow. He had just come out of a long, painful breakup. The city, once alive with noise, now pressed against him like a cage. A weekend alone in the mountains, he thought, would clear his mind. He parked at an old service trail that hadn't seen traffic in years. There was no ranger booth, no sign of other hikers, just a rusted board swallowed by pine needles that read, "Summit Trail, 8 miles." The air was still, too still. No birds, no flies, not even the soft hum of insects. Only the wind brushing the bark of trees like a whisper that had forgotten its words. He hiked for hours, following the narrow path that wound upward through a maze of spruce and stone. By evening, he reached a small clearing near the ridge, pitched his tent, and sat watching the sun sink into the western peaks. For the first time in months, his chest felt light. Peace, fragile, but real. Then came the sound. A single sharp crack of a branch. He froze. The forest swallowed the noise as quickly as it came. He told himself it was a deer. It had to be. The next morning, when he walked back down to check his car, 2 of his tires were slashed. Clean cuts, straight and deliberate. No footprints, no tire tracks. On the driver's side window, someone had traced words into the layer of dust. "Turn back." The handwriting looked too steady for the wind, too precise to be random. Daniel's pulse thundered in his throat. His phone showed no signal, battery nearly dead. The nearest town was 20 miles away. He decided to climb higher, hoping to catch a signal from the ridge. The further he went, the quieter the world became. Even his footsteps seemed muffled, as though the ground itself was absorbing the sound. When the light began to fade, he saw them. Figures between the trees, 6, maybe more, dressed in white. Their movements were slow, deliberate, like they weren't walking, but gliding across the forest floor. Each held a lantern that glowed cold and steady, not like a flame, but like an orb of frozen light. Daniel ducked behind a fallen pine, pressing himself into the dirt. His breath came in shallow bursts. One of the figures stopped. The lantern turned slightly, casting a pale beam across the trees. For a moment, he could see a face, smooth, featureless, hidden beneath a white hood. Then he heard it. A low humming sound, rhythmic, wordless. It pulsed through the air like the vibration of a heartbeat. The figures moved closer, and the hum grew louder. He waited until the darkness thickened enough to hide him, then ran. His boots slipped on wet rock, his jacket tore against branches, and his lungs burned with every step. Behind him, the hum rose into something like a chant echoing off the cliffs. He didn't stop until he reached the ridge where the faintest flicker of cell service appeared on his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed 911, barely able to speak. By the time a park ranger found him 2 hours later, Daniel was sitting on the ground, pale and shaking. His voice was gone. When they returned to the area, the forest was empty. No footprints, no lanterns, nothing, just the cold breath of the wind through the trees. The ranger glanced over his shoulder as they left and said quietly, "You shouldn't be up here alone. We've had incidents. Some kind of group that uses the old summit grounds for rituals." Daniel didn't reply. He just stared out the window of the ranger's truck. Somewhere beyond the glass, in the folds of the forest, a faint humming seemed to rise again, soft, steady, and almost human. And he realized that silence wasn't peace. It was listening.
They say some places are born wrong, as if the earth itself remembers something it shouldn't. For Liam Carter, that place was a patch of land deep in Connecticut, known to locals as Dudleytown. It wasn't marked on most maps anymore. The name had been quietly erased over time, after decades of strange disappearances, whispered superstitions, and a long chain of accidents no one could neatly explain. But to Liam, it was a challenge, another forgotten legend to explore. He wasn't a thrill-seeker, just a curious man with a fascination for the strange corners of history. He had read that Dudleytown was once a settlement, abandoned centuries ago after its founders began to lose their minds, claiming to hear voices, seeing figures that didn't belong. Most historians called it nonsense. Still, curiosity has a way of whispering louder than reason. He arrived one cloudy afternoon in early October. The air felt heavy, as if the forest had been holding its breath for a long time. The road ended half a mile before the woods began, so he parked his car, slung a pack over his shoulder, and walked. With every step, the silence grew deeper. Even the sound of gravel under his boots seemed to fade too quickly, swallowed whole by the air. There were no birds, no insects, no wind through the leaves. It was as if sound itself refused to linger there. He began marking his trail, small white ribbons tied to branches every few hundred feet. He'd read about people losing their way here, circles that led nowhere, compasses that spun aimlessly. But Liam wasn't superstitious. He believed in logic, in things that could be measured and mapped. An hour in, he reached the remains of a stone wall, moss-covered, broken in places, but old, very old. The wall curved deeper into the trees, disappearing behind a ridge. He followed. That's when he saw the first symbol. Carved into the trunk of an ash tree, a spiral intersected by 3 lines, clean and deep. It didn't look like graffiti or anything recent. It looked ritualistic, intentional. The bark around it had healed slightly, meaning it had been there for years. He felt a chill crawl up his arms, but he told himself not to panic. The area was known for urban legends. It could have been the work of other explorers, thrill-seekers playing games. Then came the sound. Distant, thin, like the cry of a child echoing through the trees. He turned sharply, but there was nothing behind him. Only that suffocating quiet. He began walking faster. The forest looked the same in every direction. He scanned for his ribbons, the small white markers that were supposed to guide him back. But when he found the next one, his stomach dropped. It wasn't tied where he had left it. It was tied higher, eye level, not shoulder height. Someone had moved it. He pulled it down and turned in a slow circle. The forest was still, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being studied. He followed the ribbons back, or tried to, but the trail seemed to bend differently now, looping where it shouldn't. Each step he took felt heavier, slower, as though the air itself was thickening. As the last light began to fade, he saw movement. Between 2 trees far ahead, something pale slipped out of view. A person, maybe. He called out, "Hello?" No answer. Then the sound came again. Not a cry this time, but a wail, low and distant, drawn out until it sounded more like a moan than a voice. Liam's chest tightened. He turned and ran. The forest seemed to shift around him, the trees crowding closer, their roots catching at his boots. His flashlight beam trembled over bark and stone. And there, on a nearby tree, another spiral symbol. Fresh. The wood was still bleeding sap. And beneath it, another ribbon. His ribbon. Except this one was tied into a knot. He tore it off and sprinted downhill, no longer caring about direction. The wailing grew louder, filling his ears, surrounding him until it felt like the sound was coming from inside his skull. When he stumbled into a clearing, he saw the remnants of a foundation, the outline of a cabin long gone. In the center, half buried in dirt, was an old wooden box. He didn't open it. He didn't need to, because he could see the carvings all over its lid, spirals, intersecting lines, dozens of them. The air around him seemed to hum, and from behind the tree line, a faint light began to move toward him, not like a flashlight, but like fireflies merging into one silent glow. Liam turned and ran until the trees thinned and the first distant sound of passing cars reached him. When he burst onto the road gasping, the forest behind him was pitch black again, as though nothing had been there. Later, when he told a park official what happened, they only nodded quietly. "You shouldn't go in there. People don't come back the same. The land remembers things." Liam tried to laugh it off, but for weeks afterwards he heard faint wailing whenever the wind blew through his windows at night. Sometimes he swore he saw white ribbons fluttering in the reflection of the glass, though when he turned around, there was nothing there. And still part of him wanted to go back, because curiosity doesn't die easily. It waits. Just like the forest. There's something wrong about the sound of water at night. It doesn't lap or ripple the same way it does in daylight. It whispers, it breathes. And for Caleb Marsh, the reservoir was always too quiet. He'd been a maintenance worker for the small town of Northgate, New Hampshire, a fading place surrounded by pine and fog, the kind of town where the streetlights hum louder than traffic, and where everyone knows everyone, or at least thinks they do. His shift that week was simple: inspect the dam, check the turbines, and make sure the floodgates stayed clear. But Northgate Reservoir had its secrets, and its share of missing people. Most of them were drifters or campers, reported once and never mentioned again. Locals said the water was cursed, that the valley beneath the dam was once a village, drowned decades ago to make way for progress. Caleb never believed it, until the night he started working, the graveyard shift. It was just past 11 when he arrived. The rain had stopped an hour earlier, but the air still smelled like metal and moss. He parked his truck near the service shed and stepped out, flashlight in hand, the gravel crunching under his boots. The dam loomed before him, a curved wall of concrete that disappeared into blackness on either side. Below it, the spillway roared faintly, but it was distant, too distant. He walked along the catwalk, his light tracing wet handrails and rusted pipes. Every few minutes the beam would catch a flash of movement below the surface, fish, maybe, or something else. When he reached the turbine chamber, he noticed the padlock on the access door had been cut. He frowned. That wasn't normal. Only 2 people had keys, him and the supervisor, Ray Doyle. He radioed in. Static. He tried again. Nothing. The air inside the chamber was cold and wet, carrying the smell of oil and stagnant water. The turbines below were motionless. He climbed down the steel stairs, his flashlight shaking slightly as it caught on a series of wet footprints leading deeper into the tunnels. Bare footprints. "Caleb?" he called out. His voice echoed once, then vanished. He followed the prints, one step at a time, until he reached the lower maintenance tunnel. That's when he saw it. A light, flickering at the far end. For a second, relief washed over him. Maybe another worker had shown up. But as he got closer, he saw the light wasn't a flashlight at all. It was a lantern. Old, glass cracked, flame trembling. And beside it, sitting against the wall, was a man. Or what looked like a man. His clothes were drenched, covered in what looked like river mud. His head hung low, hair plastered to his face. Caleb called out again, "Hey! You all right?" No answer. He stepped closer, shining his light. The man's chest wasn't moving. His skin was pale, almost translucent. Caleb froze. And then, in the silence, came the faint sound of water dripping, steady, rhythmic, behind him. He turned. At the other end of the tunnel, another figure stood, this one upright, still, soaked, watching him. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" The figure tilted its head slowly, as if curious. Then it began to walk, barefooted, each step echoing wetly against the concrete. Caleb stepped back, heart hammering, fumbling for his radio again. Static. Just static. When he looked up, the figure had stopped, now just 10 feet away. He could see its face now, or what was left of it. Eyes clouded, lips bluish, a jagged tear across the cheek exposing something black beneath the skin. Caleb stumbled backward, flashlight shaking, the beam flaring off the wet floor. When it steadied, the figure was gone. He turned and ran. The tunnel curved, his boots slapping against the concrete, until he burst through the exit door and into the open air. His lungs burned as he gasped, looking back toward the dam, but something caught his eye. Across the surface of the reservoir, dozens of small ripples were spreading outward, one after another, like something or many things were moving beneath. He backed toward his truck, fumbling for his keys when he heard a voice behind him. "Don't leave yet." He froze. It was Ray, standing at the edge of the dam, flashlight in hand. "Ray, Jesus, man! What the hell's going on?" Ray just stared at him, his expression unreadable. His eyes distant. "You saw them, didn't you?" he said quietly. Caleb hesitated. "Saw who?" Ray smiled, small, cold, knowing. "The ones who live under." He gestured toward the black water. "They come when the lights go out. Always have." Caleb stepped back,
You're not making sense." Ray took another step forward. "You'll understand soon." Then he turned and walked toward the edge of the dam. "Ray!" Caleb sprinted after him, but Ray didn't stop. He reached the railing, climbed up, and without hesitation, stepped over. The splash echoed across the reservoir. Caleb screamed his name, his voice breaking the silence, but there was no answer, only ripples spreading across the surface again, wider, slower, and then stillness. He called the police. They searched the reservoir for days. They never found Ray's body, but a week later, the dam's night cameras captured something. A single frame, a figure standing on the water, barefooted, motionless, staring straight into the lens. Months passed. Caleb quit his job, moved 2 towns over, but some nights, when the wind was right, he swore he could hear the sound of lapping water through his apartment window, soft, steady, rhythmic. And if he closed his eyes long enough, he could hear footsteps, wet and slow, walking closer across the floor.